So here we see the title slide for our generic FinTech presentation. And we're going to view this presentation first and then talk about the different features that it has. So there are a couple of ways to view the presentation. First, I could go up to this icon at the top. I could use the icon down here at the bottom, which would allow us to start the presentation from the slide we're currently on. Or on the slideshow tab, I can use either from beginning or from current slide. In this case, I'm going to use a PowerPoint shortcut. I'm going to hit the Alt button, and you'll see those numbers associated with our quick access toolbar. And in this case, the number 4 allows us to present from the beginning of the slideshow. And so here we see the slideshow, and if I want to advance the slide, I can either click the mouse or the arrow. You'll notice that we have some red font at the top, some generic information, and then we see a transition from one slide to the other. Here we have a slide that is a comparison between two things. In this case, we're going to compare traditional banks and fintech, and comparisons can be set up in the layout slide. We'll also see motion here from the FDIC logo, and this will start with a curved line and then go to a straight line after that with a continued animation. And then we have a delay, and we'll see a white box that is removed to reveal the SEC logo. Another transition. We have demographic information in red, and we'll see that once we click, that demographic information will change. And we're emphasizing the font with a different color change. You'll also notice that number of employees has been omitted here. And in this case, we have a shape that's been inserted, and we've used the eyedropper in order to make it the same color as the cell in the table. And so that's simply going to be an exit animation where that shape has been removed. Here you'll see an entrance animation with some generic picture. Another slide transition. And here we have inserted a video. If we were to play this video, we'll see information about the Federal Reserve. You notice that when we try to advance the slide again, that's the end of the slideshow. But if we view the set of slides, we'll notice that there is an additional slide, and this slide in this case has been hidden. So let's go back to the beginning and talk about some of the layouts of this presentation. The first thing you'll notice is that we have a title slide, and the reason we know it's a title slide because if we go to layout, you'll see that it's a title slide. The next slide layout is title and content, and then immediately after that we have a comparison. The next thing we'll do is go to the next slide, and you'll see a little star underneath the number for the slide, and that's going to indicate that there's either going to be a transition to the slide or an animation on the slide. If you want to know if there's an animation, you would go up to Animations, and then activate the animation pane. In this case, it was already selected, so I can toggle between showing it and not showing it. If we go to the next slide, we will see the animation that includes a curved line and also animation that includes a straight line. And in this case, our animation pane tells us that the FDIC logo is going to start in this position, and then from there is going to end up in this position. The white box covering it, you'll notice that it's been selected based on the change in color for this icon. And if we select that white box, we'll notice that it's just a white box that's covering up that logo. On the animation pane, you'll see different information here. You notice that this starts on a click, or when we go to advance a slide. This animation is going to last 2 seconds. And there is no delay between when we click the mouse and when that animation starts. This is kind of an outline of when we expect to have all those animations occur. In this case, you could see there's a difference between the end of this animation and the one after it. And if we activate that animation, we'll see that there's a 3-second delay between the end of this one and the following one. If we decide that we want to preview this animation, we can. Whichever one we have selected, if we hit play from, it's going to show the process of the animation for this particular slide from that point. You'll also notice that each of these are labeled and easy to identify. Normally when you go to insert something, so for example, if I were going to insert an object here, I could go to a shape. The default in this case comes up for me as a blue box. And if I added an animation to it by going to the animation pane, maybe I wanted to do a wheel animation, you'll notice that it shows up as some generic rectangle too. And so maybe we want to rename that so we know exactly what it's identifying. Here though, it isn't easy to see necessarily how we might rename it. We can try to double click. And all that does is give us the different animation options, right? So there are additional options within this pop-up window that don't necessarily appear on the ribbon at the top of PowerPoint. And so we have to figure out a way to rename this thing. And so one way would be to go up to the Home tab. If we want to go to Edit, and we'll see the Select option. And then we can highlight Selection Pane. And we'll get another optional box that shows up here. And it has all of the selections that appear on this particular slide. So for example, we have the SEC logo, which is this right here, and we know that it's selected based on our selection pane. This is going to be the white box that covers it up. This rectangle, you'll notice that it's listed at the top of the selection pane, and the reason for that is that it's going to cover everything under it. Right? It sits on top or is moved to the front of the slide. This white box appears below the FDIC logo, which means it's going to be toward the back of the slide, and if I move it here, it's going to show up behind the FDIC logo. And so if you ever need to adjust the position of these particular items, you can. For example, I can move the white box to go in front of the FDIC logo, where it would then cover it up. Another way to do that is to go to Arrange, and we can either bring forward or send backward. And we'll notice that bring forward moves it up one position, and send backward moves it back one position. And so we can affect it there. This is also a place where we can insert a name for these individual objects. So I can double click on that and rename it. If I wanted to hide a particular object, I can click on this button to hide it as well. And so we can insert these different objects using our Insert tab on the ribbon, which might include a shape, a text box, an equation in some cases, or a video. And there's also some pre-built information in PowerPoint as well, including the date and time and a slide number. You may also notice that these slides are in a particular format, and these slides are presented in a standard format. If we were to go to the Design tab, we'll notice that we have the option for slide size of standard or widescreen. And so you can select the slide format that works best for you depending on your presentation and projector. When we viewed the presentation, we also noticed that there was a transition between each slide. And if we go to the transitions, we'll see that for this slide, it's airplane. For the previous slide, it was prestige. For the following slide, it will be wind. And these are the transitions that go from one slide to the other. They're slightly different than an animation, and they may be used to signal to your audience that you're going from one slide to the next. With respect to our animation, you can see on our animation pane that there are different types of animations. So if I were to go to the Animations tab and select a particular object, that will activate that object, and it will allow us to provide some animation to it. Those in green are entry animations. Those in yellow or this orange color will be emphasis animations, and depending on what you've highlighted, some of these will appear and won't appear. And those in red are exit animations. In this case, you also see that we have three different types here. The first one, the title, is going to have a brush color associated with it, which is why we saw the text go from red to orange. This animation is an exit animation. It's going to disappear, and it's a box that's based on the color using the eyedropper. And in order to get that, If we wanted to maybe insert a block arrow, and we wanted that arrow to be the same color as the color in the FinTech logo here, we could go to Shape Fill. We could always use our more fill colors with custom colors, but in this case I'm simply going to use the eyedropper. Go to this color and it offers a preview in that box, and you'll notice that our block arrow was filled with that color. And it's a little bit difficult to see here, but you can notice that there's a blue outline on that arrow as well. If I make that outline a little bit stronger, it becomes more obvious. I'm going to change that outline to the same color that we had before that's used in the rest of the block arrow as fill. So now that we have that arrow formatted, we could go to animations, and maybe we want to have some movement to this arrow. And I could use different things. So for example, I can include a shape, where it happens to be the shape of a circle. And if I wanted to, I could select the options for that particular animation. I can go to Effect Options by clicking on the arrow to the right. And you'll see here, there are some different functions that allow me to change how quickly it starts and ends with the animation. If I wanted to slow this animation down, I could go change the timing there. Or I could affect the timing here as well. And so there we see movement for that animation. The next thing you may notice is that the titles for these two particular slides show up as this red font. So for this slide number 4 and this slide number 2, we see red font. And one thing PowerPoint allows us to do is to change the format of the entire presentation by using what's called a slide master. So if we go to View and then Slide Master, we will see a template for this particular presentation. And what you'll notice is that on this presentation, I have it set up to where the Slide Master, for a slide with this particular layout, will come up with a red title. So if we close this view, we notice that these two slides have a layout of title and content. The slide that shows comparison does not come up in that format. And the reason, if we go back to Slide Master, under View, Slide Master, we notice that this particular slide is the only one that shows up when we have content for this particular title. So in other words, the red font on the title is only going to appear on this type of slide. If we wanted to affect the different font, we could go to a different type of slide, select all of it, and then change the font as well. So there are different advantages to using this Slide Master. Rather than having to go in and select each individual slide, we can change the format on the entire presentation by going to Slide Master. There's a type of emphasis animation on that particular text. We'll notice that it's emphasis based on the color here. And if we wanted to play that or get a preview of that animation, we can hit play from, and we'll see all the animation on this slide. In this case, it goes from red to orange. And we see the additional animation after that. If I wanted to change this particular animation, I could. I could go to Animations. And you'll notice that this is a brush color because we've selected this type of text and it's going to paint it with a different brush color. We could change it to a different color if we wanted to. We could go to green where it will paint it to a different color. And so that's one of the things we could use in PowerPoint to emphasize some information in the presentation. The last thing that we may notice in this case, there are notes down at the bottom. And while you may use these notes to take notes during a presentation in a class, for example, in this case, we've used it to describe what's going on in this slide. So for example, this layout is title and content. We know that by going to the Home tab and Layout. We have an object inserted, which includes a table and a picture. The transition is wind. There's an entrance, emphasis, and exit animation. And then the animation line, we could add in that we've added a shape. And additional features, the animation with the same color as the table using an eyedropper. That would be this box here. Additional formatting, we have this named Ventec logo, and we see that on our selection pane. And we have a named table, which is our company information table. And so these notes can be used to summarize what's on these individual slides. The last thing that we'll notice is that we have this video inserted. Maybe we would go to Insert, and then use this video as an option and an online video.